So moving on a little bit towards the end of the second mamar. Last week we spoke about the inyan of koach haklulim and etzem neise koach. Okay, so in the second mamar, the Rabbi Michoel is being mevaya that Atzilus is a mamutza between Ein Sof and Oilos. Right, Be'emerson, this is an inyan klali that since everything has to be v'seidah v'hadroga, the yesod hadvarim is always that everything has to be v'seidah v'hadroga. So the way the English is misyachis to Oilos goes with the whole system. That's the whole musig of seidah ishtarshlus. So when the Rabbi Michoel talks about Atzilus as being a mamutza, he's going to explain in which way is it a mamutza. So first question is Atzilus gilui hahelem or yesh mi'ayin? This is a question that you find in many different places. Is Atzilus gilui hahelem yesh mi'ayin? And the way that Rabbi Michoel answers it over here is different to the way it's in Samach Vav. Is that we can split up Atzilus into two inyanim. And this is actually where it begins the whole bio inyan of Keilim. We're going to split the inyan of the spheres of Atzilus into Oiros and Keilim. The Oiros, Oir is Oir, which means it's gilui hahelem. And Keilim is going to be the chelik, which is yesh mi'ayin, which is berichuk. And it's at this point where the Rabbi Michoel starts to begin to explain the inyan of Keilim. So in order to make it more interesting, we're going to call it that here the Rabbi Michoel begins Masechtas Keilim. We have to remember that this is a very important yesod. When we talk about Oiros and Keilim, we sometimes can easily get mixed up. We have to remember there are two different Masechtas, Masechtas Oiros and Masechtas Keilim. By the way, it's not mufrach to use the word Masechta, because you have a sefer called Mishnas Chassidim, Sefer Kabbalah, which he has Masechtas. He has Masechtas Ak, Masechtas Atzilus, Masechtas Toyu. He has different Masechtas. So we're going to make our own Masechtas. Now this is Masechtas Oiros and Keilim. The reason why it's good to call it like that, just Akapan B'Shem HaMushal, is because it makes a klokite. For example, you'll find sometimes in Maimorim that it says, where does the kav come from? There's a stira. In one place you can find that it says the kav, says in Eitz Chaim clearly, the kav comes from Oir and Sof. How did the kav come about? There was a silik of Oir and Sof, and then chazav hemshech hakav. So where does the kav come from? Oir and Sof. It makes sense. The kav is Oir and Sof is Oir, and this is a little bit of Oir and Sof. But you'll also find a place where it says that the kav comes from the reshimu. And the reshimu is not Oir and Sof. The reshimu is something else. It's a different lashon. For example, it says when it splits up Seidah Ishtarshlus into Yud Kei Vav Kei, it says the reshimu is the Yud, which is on the top of the Vav, which is the Kav. You'll actually find in Hecholzu, in Perek Chav Zayin, the Rebbe has a whole ha'ora, a very long ha'ora over this. 3 long ha'oras in Perek Chav Zayin of Hecholzu, and one of them is to answer this, because in the Maimah of Hecholzu, in the Pnim of the Maimah, it says that the reshimu is called a Yud, and the Kav is a Vav that comes from the Yud. So the kav comes from the reshimu. Does that make sense? So the Rebbe says a certain expression over there, but we're going to see it over here in Ayin Beis clearly that we're going to split it up. When we say that the kav is coming from the reshimu, we don't mean it's coming from the etzem reshimu, from the reshimu itself. The reshimu is nothing to do with Oir. That's why I'm calling it a separate mesechta. It's nothing to do with Oir because the reshimu is the koach hagvul. That means the reshimu is a moker, is responsible for Keilim, Parsois, Tzimtzumim, Hemshech, guf, anything to do with, nothing to do with Oir. That's where it all comes from the reshimu. Whereas Oiros all come from Oir. Oir comes from a previous Oir, which comes from a previous Oir, which comes from the Kav, which comes from Oir and Sof. Where's the Shoresh Harishon? He doesn't actually get into mamish over here, but where's the Shoresh Harishon? It all comes to one point. Where's the one point? Where do we have the reshimu and the Oir and Sof? Where do they come from? This is a lashon you find in many places from Avodas HaKodesh. Kshem sheyesh lekoach ein sofu shleimusa dekula. atzmus is shleimus of hakel. Kshem sheyesh lekeach bebilti bal gvul, kach yesh lekeach begvul. Just like he has the ability to express himself in bligu, which is Oir itself, he also has the koach hagvul. What is the koach hagvul? In Lashon HaChassidus it's called the reshimu. Why it's called the reshimu is discussed in other places. But the reshimu be'etzim is a koach hagvul, has nothing to do with Oir. Nothing to do with Oir mitzad atzmai. Of course it has to do with Oir Lapoil, because when the siluk of the Oir and Sof happened, where did the Oir and Sof go to? Tzimtzum Eina Kipshuta. It didn't go away and disappear. It's there. The Lashon is that it went behelem inside the reshimu. So the reshimu is compared, the Lashon in other places is it's like a keli godel. It's like one big keli. It's not a keli, it's the koach to make kelim. You have to remember that the koach hagvul is ein sof, just like the koach habli gvul. In other words, mitzad atzmus, there's no more yichus of Oir and Sof to atzmus than the reshimu to atzmus. They both have a yichus to atzmus. Kshem means exactly the same. Kshem sheyesh lekeach bebilti bal gvul, kach yesh lekeach begvul. They're both meyuchas to atzmus. One has no bigger shaychus than the other one. It's just in our minds we are teifus that atzmus is misbate more in bli gvul than in gvul. But be'emerson, the yichus is the same. The first expression of koach hagvul happened. When do we see the koach hagvul coming out as a koach bifnei atzmai? That was based on the tzimtzum. Shas the tzimtzum happened and you were masalik the Oir and Sof. Is niskala there's something else. Beforehand you only saw Oir and Sof. Or to quote the Rabbi Michoel Golomb, for example, the lashon over there is Keilim at tzimtzum there was isgabrus habli gvul. Achrei at tzimtzum was isgabrus hagvul. Both are the same, both of them come from atzmus. The difference is what was b'hisgabrus. Keilim at tzimtzum was hisgabrus of bli gvul, achar at tzimtzum was hisgabrus of gvul. What happened b'shas the tzimtzum? There was the siluk of the Oir and Sof, and it was niskala there's something else, something called cheshech. That's why there's actually one of the biurim in the taich of the mamar Chazal, actually nivra ha'olam or Yehu shmei bilvad. What does it mean nivra ha'olam? Which olam? One of the biurim of the olam is the olam of the helam. The first helam, actually nivra olam means before there was the tzimtzum, before there was the first olam, the first helam. What's the first helam? The tzimtzum arishin, when it was niskala, that was a koach hagvul. In fact, that's the whole kavanah of the tzimtzum. The whole kavanah of the tzimtzum is to be megala that there's something else besides gilui, besides Oir and Sof, a koach hagvul. And that's the lashon that he uses in Perik Ches, that is. I'm assuming that this page belongs to Perik Ches. It says over there that the inyan of the tzimtzum hu legalis sheirish hadin. Sheirish hadin. It's just good to know another very interesting thing about the inyan of Keilim and the reshimu, which this you'll find in the Kutei Torah in the mamar of Lahov Mashkos Beis Chaim and the Hisafis of Sefer Vayikra. There he says over there a very interesting thing, that the whole Masechtas Keilim, the whole Masechtas reshimu, is not talked about in Eitz Chaim. In other words, Reb Chaim Vital, who was the main makabel of the Arizal, he wrote the whole kislev Arizal, everything he wrote. But you won't find the inyan of the reshimu in Eitz Chaim. Who was Megala the reshimu? The inyan of the reshimu. So over there it's brought down that in Eitz Chaim, which is also written by Reb Chaim Vital, there's a hagor from the Ramaz, which is a famous makub which is brought down all over the place in Chassidus, the Ramaz, Pirush Ramaz. The Ramaz has a hagor in Eitz Chaim, and there he says that when it says in Eitz Chaim or in Eitz Chaim that there was a siluk of Oir and Sof and there was nothing left, there was a cholol l'mokum ponui, there he writes cholol lav dafka, wasn't just a cholol, ki imnisha reshimu, there was leftover reshimu, which is based on the klal that kedusha lo zazim im kelim. If there was a place where there was kedusha and the kedusha goes away, there remains a reshimu of kedusha. So if the Oir and Sof was in the mokum achol, Oir and Sof was there and then it went away, you're going to have a reshimu left over. But it's not clear what the reshimu is. The only one who explains, and even there it's not clear, but the only one who goes into more detail about the reshimu is the Emek HaMelech, which was another makubal who was a Talmud of the Arizal, but wasn't from the school of Reb Chaim Vital. Right? Reb Chaim Vital writes, don't look at anybody else's Sfarim. And in fact, the Emek HaMelech, by some Mekubalim, they wouldn't look in that Sefer because it's not from Reb Chaim Vital. But as the Rebbe said in the mamar in Tavshim Memches, in Shnas Hakil, Tavshim Memches and Shavuos, in the middle of the mamar, the Rebbe started speaking about this, the Sefer Ayin Beis, and said that in Mezrich they did start to learn parts of Ayin Beis, but they had to get reshus from the Magid which parts to learn. Because it's not free for all, you don't know what exactly is Mechuvin. Since it's not from the Chaim Vital, you have to know which parts to learn and how to learn it. And then the Rebbe said from the Hagos, from the Tzemach, said that you can learn different parts of the Ayin Beis. Akoponim, the Ayin Beis, the Alter Rebbe brings down the Kodeter, is the one that was Marchiv Bir in the Inyan of the reshimu. That what is the reshimu? It's the Inyan of Oiros. Again, nothing to do with Oir. It's a Mesechtes Oiros, a Mesechtes Keilim, has nothing to do with Oir. When was Nisgala and when can be Nisgala this Inyan? And so, one second. And the only words that we have in the Eitz Chaim that alludes to this Inyan of the reshimu is that it says in the Eitz Chaim that the Inyan of Tzimtzum is legalis Sheirish Hadin. That's as far as we get in the Eitz Chaim. But what is this Sheirish Hadin? And that's this thing called the reshimu is not in the Eitz Chaim. This says in Ayin Beis. But this is going to become a very important part in the whole hemshech inyanim in this hemshech over here. Because there's a lot about the reshimu, there's a lot of interesting things from the reshimu which is negay over here. For example, in the beginning of the third mamar, it's something that you probably have heard about. It's brought down Hayem Yom, Kesef Shem Tov, that the difference between the Zayin Shemus She'enin Imchokim and Shem Havaya. Everybody knows Havaya goes on the oil. What are the Zayin Shemus? They go on the Keilim. Keil is in Chesed, Elikim is gvul, etc. So in the beginning of the third mamar he says these Shemus are not the names of the Keilim, they are the names of the Chayes of the Keilim. What does it mean, the Chayes of the Keilim? In other words, the Keilim, I said before, have their own line, their own Masechta. The Keilim have a Chayes coming from the reshimu. So besides the oil that's mislabish in the Kli, that's like a neshama in the guf has its own shayrish. So each Keli has a different name because there's a different chayes. It's a nelam dika chayes. It's not an oil. It's a chayes nelam that's coming from the reshimu. That's why when it says we say in Pasach Eliyahu, kad antistalik minai ishtoharu kegufa b'lo nishmasa, that when the oil is mistalik, there remains gufim without a neshama. What does it mean that there remains gufim? If the neshama goes away, everything should go away. No, the guf remains. By the way, that's begashmis also. If somebody passes away, the guf remains. The chayr, if his whole chayes is coming through his nefesh, should be like it says in the Shayich B'Amunah. As soon as the chayes goes, the guf should disappear. It doesn't go like that. The reason is because the guf has its own chayes. The chayes happens to go through the nefesh, but it does have its own chayes, and a reshimu is left even after the neshama leaves. That's what takes it. Mitzad the fact that guf has its own shayrish. In fact, it's known from the Rebbe Marash. The Rebbe brings down very often from the Rebbe Marash. It says, "La'asid lavai haneshama nizaynis min haguf." The neshama is going to receive chayes from the guf. In other words, there's a maila in the guf, even regarding the neshama. It seems the Rebbe Marash has a thing about the reshimu and the guf la'asid lavai. We'll get to that in a second. So the reshimu is the koach hagvul, and that was nisgala al yidei tzimtzum. Just to bring it to a moshel that could bring you to understand, picture what the reshimu could be. Again, this is only a moshel, but it is brought down this moshel occasionally, and that is if we take, for example, the ocean. Right, the ocean is mayim, loads of water. Kamayim layom machasim. Right, soon finish off the Rambam. Kamayim layom machasim. You only see water. That would be a moshel. Lifnei atzimtzum. What do you see? Oil and sof. Kamayim layom machasim. You don't see anything else. Hidden under there's a whole country of mountains and whatever swims underwater. So that all these countries, all these mountains, let's say, there's a mountain in the bottom of the ocean, but it's mechusa with mayim. Imagine somebody would be mesalik the mayim for a while. Somebody drained out the ocean. What do you suddenly have? You suddenly see a whole Medina over there, of mountains and valleys and whatever's there. So it was nisgala, something new that was hidden the whole time. The same thing was the reshimu. The reshimu be'emerson was there the whole time. It's a koach hagvul. But it's ne'elam, because there was a hisgabrus of oir and sof. If you masalik the ocean, be masalik the oir and sof, will be nisgala, the koach hagvul. So that's the reshimu. Since it's a different mesechta, it also works on different in different ways. Oir works by from golui, so you can see that this oir is coming from a previous madreg. It's megale, it's gilui ahelim. That's the musad of oir. Oir is gilui, so you're always going to see where it's coming from. Keilim don't tell you where they're coming from. Keilim, their connection with their shayrish, which is the reshimu, is ba'ifan ne'elam. Those are the zayin shemus, the chayis akli, the chayis of the kelim. That is a ne'elam tika chayis. Also, there will be a difference, which is what they discuss in the next mamar. The difference will be is how you get to the kelim. Again, what are we trying to explain over here? Just remember the hemshech ha'inyanim. We're trying to explain that Atzilus is a mamutza and has a chelik which is a mamutza has to be murkav of two sides, the sad ha'elyon and the sad ha'tach. So he split up Atzilus and he said the Oiros hagilui ha'elam and the kelim ha'yeshmiyayin. That means the way the Oiros are coming down, it's b'derech his galus. You can see the connection. This Oir HaChochma is coming from the Oir HaChochma HaKolol B'Keser, which is coming from the Oir HaChochma HaKolol B'Akudim, which is coming from koach, which is coming from the kav, which is coming from Oir himself. So you see one hemshech. Mashein Kein Keilim, you don't see the connection. Why don't you see the connection? It's first of all, the reshimu is a koach ne'elam. But more so, what he goes into the next mamar is to explain is the way the kelim come about. How do the kelim come about? If the koach hagvul is not an oir, it's not a movable, it's not nichsid an idea, it doesn't move. It's a koach to make kelim. It's not like an oir which is a gilui. Right? So oir is a gilui, so let it come down further and further until we're being into Atzilus. The koach hagvul, the reshimu, is not a koach that is a gilui. So it doesn't move. It's like, for example, if you take our moshel, mayim in the ocean moves around. So if you make a kelim somewhere and you bring a pipe from the ocean will take the water and it will go into somebody's kitchen sink. But the earth under the ground of the ocean is not going to move anywhere. It has a koach that it can make whatever it can grow, whatever the earth can grow. But the koach hagvul itself is not going to do anything. It's a koach. It's an etzem hakoach. So how are we going to get the koach of the gvul to make kelim? We want now 10 kelim, one called chochma, bina, das, etc. We want to have 10 kelim coming out from the koach. Well, how's that going to happen? So we need somebody who's going to be a bar poil. Somebody who's going to move and make from who's going to take this koach hagvul and going to do something with it, create kelim. Right? For example, we take our moshel of the karka that's under the ground, the koach hatzmicha which is in the ground. If you want, it can make you beautiful fruits. But you've got to plant a tree, and the tree will have branches, and off the end of the branch will come an apple. Then you have your apple. You've got to be ma'oda, the koach hatzmicha, to do something. Otherwise, it just stands. I mean, there are things that grow wild, as Alter Rebbe says, mamish yeshmiyayin, the things that grow wild on their own. But the way it works for fruits, for example, you have to be ma'oil the karka. They should start doing something. And the karka doesn't grow the fruit, the karka has to grow the tree, and from the end of the tree comes the fruit. So who is the bar poil that's going to take the koach hagvul, this reshimu, and start making it give fruits, kelim, 10 kelim. So that's the koach hapoil, the koach hapoil benifa, the koach hapoil is going to make the koach hagvul make something. That's the kav. This is where they join, the Oiros and the kelim. In other words, first we have to make the split. Kelim atzimtzum was oir and sof. There's an ocean, kamayim le'amachasim. We only see gilui oir and sof. The koach hagvul was ne'elam, had no expression. Kimat, no expression. Then there was the siluk of the oir and sof. It was nizgala. There's a koach hagvul, a koach to make gvul, nothing to do with oir, but it's not going to do anything. So what happens now is the Eibishter was mamshech a kav from the oir and sof, which is mislabish in the koach hagvul. Remember we said before the reshimu is like a kli. It's mislabish in the koach hagvul, but it's not really a kli because it's a koach. It's a koach of ein sof. So let's call it. It's mislabish, meaning it's misyachid with the koach hagvul, which is the koach reshimu, and mikan ve'elach, the kav now has two things: his own mitzias, which is an oil of kav, oil hamamale, and inside he absorbed with him, in him, also another koach called the koach hagvul. So although you only see a kav, but he has also inside him the koach hagvul. The mayin nafkimin there is the koach hagvul. Now the kav has the power to make kelim. And that will be the expression that he says at the end of the second mamar. Mihis avus ha'oir nasa hakli. From the obvious, from the thickness, this is literal translation, of the oil comes the kli. What do you mean from the thickness of the oil? The thickness of the oil, the obvious of the oil, is the koach hagvul that's absorbed inside the kav. The kav, again, went through the channel of the reshimu. It didn't just come down straight from Oiros itself, a kav. It was misyached with the koach hagvul. So now the kav has not just oil, he also has absorbed inside him another koach. But it's absorbed inside him. He's oil. So you don't see the koach hagvul doing anything. When the kav goes down and starts being mitzamtzem and shooting off oiros into different directions, it will shoot off an oil and a kli. Right? In the next mamar he says, but how does that kli separate itself from the oil, from the kav, or from the oil hachma that's coming down? How does it split off and become a kli separate from the oil? We want an oil and a kli as two separate kaviyachol entities, that the keli is there and the oil is coming into him. So how do you split off the keli from the oil? For that he explains something called hakois oil pnimi and oil makif, which is in the second mamar. We'll get to that in a second, but I don't think we'll get to it this time. We'll get to it next time. But akapanim, here you see the seder ha'inyanim is that the oil kav is an oil that has in it also the koach hagvul. Therefore the kav is also responsible for the kelim, not mitzad atzmoi, but mitzad the fact that he is misyached with the reshimu. This is the expression you'll find in some places that it says the oil is mahave hakli b'koach reshimu. The oil makes the kelim b'koach the reshimu, not b'koach atzmoi, because he's only oil. Oil can only make oil. It's like saying, bring a neshama into the world and the neshama will make the guf. Neshamas don't make gufim. Neshamas can make more neshamas. Oiros can make more oiros. How will from a neshama come a guf? It will never happen. But if this neshama is not pure neshama, it's a neshama which was misyached with the koach haguf, then the neshama could give off a guf, because it has the power of guf. What's the mashal for such a thing that you see oil giving off kelim? In nefesh ha'adam, what would be the mashal of an oil giving off kelim? You have it in seichel ha'adam. A person has a havana, a certain gedank. He has in his mind a certain seichel, right? Now, when you get to chokhmah, for example, or higher than chokhmah, this, especially the baraka mavrik, there's no oisius there, right? Is seichel oisius or is seichel oil? What is seichel mitzad atzmai? Seichel mitzad atzmai is oil. The oisius, you can choose which oisius. If you speak a different language, you can choose different oisius, right? If you want to say it in your way, you want to say the Eibush is the king of the world, you can say Adon Olam, Melech Olam, Ribono Olamim. You take your pick. The oil is not machriach the oisius. So how does the oil, where do the oisius come from? The oisius have their own shayrish. Mesechtes oisius is like Mesechtes Keilim. The shayrish of oisius is from etzem nefesh. And the expression is, the nefesh is malaya oisius. It has the ability to make all different types of oisius. And the oil is oil. But they work together. It's like the kav and the reshimu. They work together. How do you get the oisius? Oisius are static. They're standing. They don't do anything. Oisius is kelim. What is an oisius? An oisius is a kelim, and inside that is a seichel. These words are meichel this oil. But which oisius? When do the oisius come about? As you're being mitzamtzem the oil, more oisius come into being. So when you're in the level of chokhmah, which is a baraka mavrik, and I ask you, what's your big chiddush? You just say, I got it. What's the oisius? You can't even explain it. You just know that there was a certain behiras which made a koach in the whole pilpul. When you start being mitzamtzem it more and more, it comes more and more oisius. That's already in bina. You're able to speak the oisius. So as you mitzamtzem the oisius come out from the oil. Where would the oisius start? Seichel is only oil. Where did it come oisius? Because oil and kelim work together, even though they're two different sharashim, they are misyached and they work together. So as you mitzamtzem the oil, from the obvious of the oil, from the thickness, so to speak, from the oisius haklulim baha oil, come out the oisius. Anyway, I think we'll stop over there for now.